CIA Director William Burns predicted an ugly next few weeks in Ukraine during today's House Intelligence Committee hearing on worldwide threats. Top intelligence leaders believe Russian President Vladimir Putin is likely undeterred by heavy sanctions from the West and will try to escalate attacks in the coming weeks. General Scott Berrier, the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, said a low-confidence assessment estimates Russia's military has lost between 2,000 and 4,000 troops as Ukrainian forces and civilians fight back. Intelligence officials said they are closely monitoring Russia's strategic and nuclear weapon movement. For more on today's hearing, CBS News intelligence and national security reporter Olivia Gazis is with me now. Olivia, thanks very much for being with us. I want to start by playing some of what Director of National Intelligence Avril Haines said about President Putin during today's hearing.
Assess Putin feels aggrieved the West does not give him proper deference and perceives this as a war he cannot afford to lose. But what he might be willing to accept as a victory may change over time given the significant costs he is incurring. Putin's nuclear saber-rattling is very much in line with this assessment. Putin's public announcement that he ordered Russia's strategic nuclear forces to go on special alert in response to aggressive statements, as he called them, from NATO leaders was extremely unusual. We have not seen a public announcement from the Russians regarding a heightened nuclear alert status since the 1960s, but we also have not observed force-wide nuclear posture changes that go beyond what we have seen in prior moments of heightened tensions during the last few decades.
It's sobering to hear that. What else did intelligence officials have to say about where this war potentially goes?
Well, Elaine, the assessments delivered today by the country's top intelligence leaders were quite grim. As you just heard there, even the fact that Russia's economy is getting pummeled and the fact that its military hasn't notched any meaningful successes in Ukraine to date isn't enough to make President Putin back off. To the contrary, U.S. officials now believe he's going to be doubling down on violence in Ukraine. And in part, that's because he was either terribly misinformed by advisors or himself significantly miscalculated realities on the ground. The CIA director said that Putin was wrong on multiple fronts. He was wrong about the resilience of Ukrainian forces, wrong about how decisively the West would respond, wrong about how well prepared Russia's economy was to withstand sanctions, and wrong about the strength of his own military. That's a lot to get wrong when the stakes are this high. What's worrisome about all of that is that Putin now really doesn't have any good options. There's no viable political endgame, is how officials put it today. Even if he eventually succeeds in toppling the current government in Ukraine, that country is still very well positioned to sustain a robust and long-term and sizable insurgency. So even any pro-Russia government that Putin installs would be under constant threat, and a contested occupation of the whole country of more than 40 million people is something that Russia wouldn't be able to sustain in the long term.
And Olivia, I want to ask about something, there's been a lot of discussion about, a lot of speculation, but did anyone today offer insights into Vladimir Putin's possible mental state?
Yes, the CIA director, William Burns, was asked specifically about this because, as you said, it's top of mind for a lot of people. And he said that Putin's views on Ukraine and many issues over the years had noticeably hardened, in part because Putin, the man, is increasingly isolated and exposed to few, if any, dissenting views around him. And what the CIA director, Bill Burns, said is that, in his view, that doesn't make Putin crazy, as some have suggested he might be, but it does make him extremely difficult to deal with. Burns had some vivid language to describe Putin as having been stewing in a combustible combination of grievance and ambition for a number of years. An official said that today, right now, he was frustrated, he was angry, and it's for those reasons that he might decide to press on and to grind down Ukrainian forces over the next several weeks with little regard to what civilian toll that might take. Because, as the DNI put it today, he now sees this as a war that he cannot lose.
And in fact, we've already seen what appear to be the intentional sort of targeting of civilians. Olivia, what was said about any possibility of nuclear escalation with Russia?
Elaine, of all things, this was actually one of the few areas where the assessments today were a relief rather than a concern, and you heard a little bit at the top. The DNI of Real Haines said that intelligence agencies are, of course, closely watching any movement of Russia's strategic and nuclear forces, but that right now there's no indication that Putin is doing anything different now than he had been doing in the past. And so the assessment now is that his decision to put those forces on high alert, although it was highly unusual, not done since the 60s, she said, that was really more of an effort to signal to the West that he has these capabilities and was really done in an effort to further deter Western support to Ukraine, not that he really means it. However, the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, Lieutenant General Scott Berrier, did add that we should take Putin at his word on something serious like this. So I guess you could say nobody's exactly exhaling just yet.
And the annual threat assessment named names. Quote, Beijing, Moscow, Tehran, and Pyongyang have demonstrated the capability and intent to advance their interests at the expense of the United States and its allies. What more was said about what these countries are doing to undermine American interests?
Sure. Well, lawmakers, as you might expect, really focused heavily today on the situation in Ukraine. But those are the sort of perennial big five threats. And so there was a discussion of, for example, how China was likely to view the situation. Not only how the Russian military campaign itself proceeds, but how much further it could serve to now galvanize the West and NATO to be acting in concert. Lawmakers also asked how Russia might use its leverage to influence the ongoing talks over the Iranian nuclear program, which we've been hearing from officials for days now saying it is very close to being finalized, but it's also in a very precarious place, and everything depends on the details now. I would just say also overall there was a lot of concern expressed by lawmakers about nuclear proliferation, which affects all of the countries you named, and China, North Korea, Iran, now racing to build up their nuclear capabilities rather than reduce them and dial them back, as the U.S. had been pushing many countries in the world to do in recent years.
Well, Olivia, this dynamic between Russia and China has been interesting to watch because, we saw what that relationship looked like leading up to the invasion. But some analysts, expressed a sense of perhaps surprise at China's willingness to express its disapproval of what Russia was doing in Ukraine. How has Russia's invasion of Ukraine complicated its relationship with China?
You're absolutely right, Elaine. This has been analyzed a ton because of how ambiguous it's been. It did arise in discussion today and generated an interesting set of observations. The DNI said that yes, Russia and China had grown closer in recent years, mostly because there's this alignment of their, autocratic views and a general opposition to a lot of U.S. policy. But the DNI said that there was a limit to how far that might go. And the CIA director said that, in fact, Chinese President Xi Jinping and the broader Chinese leadership was actually showing signs of being unsettled by events in Ukraine, including, again, at how they have driven the Europeans and the United States to work more closely together. Burns said that Beijing was also increasingly wary of the potential reputational damage that any close association with Moscow could produce. So far from acting as a reliable partner, as had been the preliminary indication, much less an economic savior, as some people might had speculated about China, Beijing could actually possibly begin to distance itself from Russia if things continue to go as poorly as they have been going for Moscow in the past 2 weeks.
Yeah, perhaps this Russian invasion may be shifting those geopolitical kind of alliances. We'll continue to watch what develops there. Olivia Gazis, Olivia, always good to have you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.